Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your schedule this morning to join this webinar. The intent here is to really help educate some of the folks out there who certainly have a lot of questions around what's going around, and most importantly, being able to address, how you can support your business, medical practice during these times, and how you can still have the convenience of folks working remote and things like that, and address some of the challenges that you may encounter. So overall, the subject here is business resiliency and readiness strategies. We want to help prepare you for the next wave of potential more folks working from home. I know this week we've had quite a few announcements where most folks are making an attempt to obviously work from home. In some cases it's possible, others it's not. So we'll go through some of the strategies that you can keep in mind as you're considering those options for your staff members. Again, my name is Reda Shafani. Don't want to go too deep in this, but at the end of the day, I spent 20 years in the technology space helping businesses, whether it is in healthcare or manufacturing and other verticals, with some of their business needs. And for the subject that we're covering today, some of those experiences came in handy in working with some of our clients to address some of the gaps that they may have. And I'm hoping that I can bring that a little bit to the conversation today. Just at a high level, again, we are a technology firm and we provide a number of services. Ultimately, here is mainly a focus on lessons learned and some best practices that we gathered over the years. And in recent weeks, obviously, we want to make sure that we share those with you. So let's talk about what are some of today's realities. Unfortunately, it's really hard to gauge where we are. From minute to minute, things change quite a bit. Nobody has control over the market, whether it's the stock market, what businesses are allowed to stay open, what business owners, decisions they're making to keep their doors open. We've seen everything from dental offices closing down and just sending their staff home, and we've seen some restaurants stay open for people to pick up food. But ultimately, there's quite a few things that are changing rapidly. Ultimately, what it boils down to, we are all dealing with the coronavirus, and it has an impact on a number of different businesses. Some of the things that you're seeing out there are more folks are looking or attempting to work from home for a number of obvious reasons. School closings nationwide. We still don't know if schools are going to be back next month, in 4 weeks, in 2 weeks. There's still a lot of unknowns. Some states have already made their decisions to just cancel for the rest of the year. Others are still a little bit of limbo. It is driving me crazy with my kids at home, and I still show up to work every day just to avoid the fights between my kids. But ultimately, some folks may not have that option. Daycares are closing as well. I know some schools are actually reopening their doors to help folks with daycare and watch their kids, which is definitely noble. We understand that a lot of the large gatherings and events have also closed down. So a lot of the educational conferences have either went for virtual sessions and conferences or just completely canceled the events. And some companies have made it a mandate where most of their employees will have to work from home. Now, when it comes down to all the reported cases, it's really hard to gauge where the stats are, but obviously there's a number of different sources if you care to look at and see what are some of the recommendations and things like that, CDC being one of them and things like that. So those are just some of the stats over the past few days. Every website shows a different set of numbers, but ultimately that's just more of information. And then, interestingly enough, there are more cases that are as a result of close contact than actual travel, which is certainly alarming and obviously also promotes more folks to try to stay away from gatherings and attempt to work from home. So what can you do to minimize business impact due to some of the things that are happening? And ultimately, there's some things that you can control and others that you may not control. Obviously, today we're going to focus a little bit on things from a technology perspective that we would recommend, and we can focus on 4 different major areas. The first one being remote work strategy, and that's ultimately addresses some of the questions and concern you may have around how can I support and ensure that our employees who can work from home can do it effectively without, of course, breaking any company policy or practice policy and things like that. The next part is the operational readiness. From a management perspective, what are your expectations? I know for some folks, if you think, for a medical practice that are folks working from home to try to do medical billing, the expectation is to still file claims, follow up on claims, follow up on patient statements, things like that. But for a manufacturing company, somebody that does planning and orders of material, the expectation is for them to continue to do those tasks and follow through. So from an operational perspective, just defining the expectations as you're expecting some folks to work remotely. Another key area is clear communication to everyone and how to accomplish that. Ultimately, most employees are looking for up-to-date information in terms of, are they expected to work remotely? Are they expected to come to work? What are some of the changes that they should expect? Obviously, these are, changing times, and every business is experiencing a different set of challenges. And being able to be clear with staff and communicating on what changes are happening is critical. And then the last area is cybersecurity. Believe it or not, unfortunately, there are certainly people, besides the people that are trying to stock up on hand sanitizer and toilet paper and try to sell it on eBay, there are cyber criminals that are sitting out there taking advantage of this situation and sending fake emails with fake links to stats and things like that, trying to take advantage of folks that will click on the different links and potentially fall for the scams, and also end up going on certain websites that are harmful. So we're going to cover a little bit of some of those things. But let's start with the remote work strategy. So what are some of the things that you should consider? Well, obviously, the first one starts with connecting from home. And when you're connecting from home, one of the things you have to recognize is you need to either connect to the different workloads that you need to interact with, such as emails or a medical website, or some sort of online tool that you're going to use. Whether you're using it at the office or from home, you should have access to it from home. But the other part is, of course, connecting back to the office, especially for those businesses that have a lot of their systems, housed in their office or their facility. Being able to securely connect through a VPN or some sort of remote tool is extremely helpful. Toward the end of the presentation, I'm going to cover a list of those tools that you should consider as you're looking at those options. The next part is getting the phone operational. And believe it or not, there's still plenty of businesses that are still using faxes. So ultimately, if you're not in the office, you still want to be able to receive and process any phone calls and faxes. So one of the options that different organizations should consider is soft phones or cloud hosted phones, or maybe just forward the phones from the office to a cell phone if you're going to do some sort of allowance for the staff where they can use their personal devices for answering work related phones. But it will have to be really defined and agree on what process you're going to leverage. If you already have a cloud system or you have a voice over IP within your organization and you are able to use soft phones to connect from home, absolutely. That's also another option. As far as faxes go, really the ultimate solution here is if you don't have digital faxing at the office and you just have an analog line going into a traditional fax machine, one of the options here is to basically subscribe to some of the e-faxes, which is basically a portal that you can receive and send faxes directly from a website. Leverage a communication platform so that you can talk to some of the coworkers and team members where they're sitting at home. I know there are a number of tools that everybody uses, from Microsoft Teams to Slack to Skype. There's a number of options there so that you can communicate in real time with your staff. Some of it will tell you the presence of those folks. If you want to know if they're in front of their computer, it will show you that they're active. If they're away from the computer because they're taking the dog out or they're grabbing something to eat or something, it will show that they're away. If they're on a phone call, some of these tools will actually tell you they're on a call. So these are some of the things that will allow you to have streamlined and efficient communication with some of the folks who are working from home. And then the last one for folks that are working from home or considering working from home is cloud storage when needed. And ultimately, this relates to having access to a lot of the files that some of the folks need to interact with. These files could be Word documents, contracts, Excel spreadsheets, different reports. There's certainly some folks that are already using some of the cloud storage options that are available to them. Dropbox, Box, OneDrive, Google Drive, these are all some of the options. And many of these are actually highly secure, and also they meet a lot of the criteria that we see are necessary for things like HIPAA and other industries. The next area we're going to jump to is the operational readiness. And this is really important. In fact, earlier this week, which was very interesting, that it made us really think through the different processes that we have in place as most of our workforce is able to work remotely and from home, which is around the insurance. Believe it or not, not every workers' comp plan covers accidents at home. And if whether you're a doctor's office or some sort of business where you're deciding to send people to work from home, what happens if they do have an accident at home? If they trip over something and they get hurt and they are technically on the clock, are you covering those employees getting hurt? Is workers' comp going to deny the claim because they're working from home? Is that in your coverage? And these are critical operational questions, including cybersecurity for medical offices. If somebody's connecting from home and they get hacked and the practice gets hacked, does cybersecurity cover that incident? So these are very important pieces that you would have to consider as you're looking at from an operational perspective. But the first and most important one, obviously, is defining that work policy. Remote work policy will have to be set in place so that you define the expectations that you have out of your staff members, and that way you know what they're allowed and not allowed to do as they connect into company data. Train employees on the different tools. Ultimately, there are a number of employees that are going to have access to the different systems. And in order to ensure that they know how to use the systems, you will have to provide them with some training. I know in the tech world, we take for granted technology and we always assume this is easy tool. They should be able to pick it up. But the reality is, it is certainly valuable to have your IT provider either send out cheat sheets on the different tools that you're introducing to folks, or literally train them on it and be able to spend some time on a course or even a YouTube video. And again, obviously, these things may be done remotely or just through videos that are available. Defining employee expectations. Sending folks to work from home and not telling them what to expect and how you're going to measure their performance and their productivity can be really dangerous, because ultimately you can't track and you can't monitor if they're working, if they have any distractions around them. In my case, with two kids at home fighting constantly and arguing with each other, I can relate to some of the pictures that I included in this slide, especially the one with the three kids that are laying on the floor with duct tape on their mouth. Now, I wouldn't recommend that for anybody, but when I saw that pictures, I absolutely can relate, because that's one of the things I can do. I think the only thing that's missing is our dog, who barks at anything that moves outside. So I think I would have to duct tape the dog too, but probably just leave him in a different room. The last one is productivity monitoring if needed. And this is mainly something that you would have to consider. Number one, if the staff working from home are interacting with sensitive data, and that the concerns are that you want to be able to ensure the security and protection of the data in case something does happen. You want to be able to go back and trace back who worked on that information, what employee, when they touched it, and things like that. Time attendance. We have seen some folks where they send their employees home and they want to track time attendance or activity on the computer. When folks come in the office and they clock in and clock out, there's no real way of tracking that when you send them home. There are absolutely tools that can support that. And they can give you reports in terms of productivity of your staff. Are they actually active on the computer for 8 hours a day, or 3 hours a day, or 10 hours a day? And you may offer flexibility to your staff that as long as you do your 8 hours, I don't care if you do it at 6 o'clock in the morning or start at 12 and finish at later at night. So from an operational perspective, do you have mechanisms in place and tools that can actually provide you with some of that feedback in terms of what's being done remotely? Communication strategies. Now, the reality is employees are constantly looking for information that may affect them at work. And whether it's relating to maybe infections within the business or changes to the business or just general messaging from management and leadership, being able to define a tool that will allow you to reach out to all your staff is critical. This is similar to when sometimes we have snow days or freezing rain and there's some delays that the office is going to be closed for a couple of more hours and you want to leverage some sort of group text software or tool that allows you to communicate with the entire staff to tell them that there's going to be some delays in the morning. These are different options that you have to consider in order for you to stay in contact with your staff, especially since they will not be in the office necessarily for some cases. Employee engagement. From an employee engagement, sending folks home, or for the businesses that are planning on doing so, adds a lot of stress on the employees. I think one of the conversations that I had yesterday with one of our teammates is the stress level increased significantly for a number of reasons. Number one, they feel like if they're working from home and have all these distractions, they don't feel like they're being ultimately as productive as they should be, and they feel guilty. Another one is simply the stress of, do I have to worry about having enough food to buy from the grocery store? Do I have to worry about this that's coming? So all of these are contributing to staff being extremely stressed. And obviously, if you don't see them face to face and obviously capture the emotions from, visually, then it's hard for you as an office manager, as a director, as a coworker, to talk to them and check on them and say, sorry that you're feeling this way and things like that. But ultimately, there are ways to gain some insights into the overall employee sentiments and maybe reach out to them. And there are a number of tools that I'm going to discuss that address employee engagement needs and some of the things that you can still do even though your employees or some of them are working remotely from home. Collaboration plans. How are you going to support employees working together and continuing to feel like they're still part of the team without necessarily being in the same room? And these are just some options and different strategies that folks can take advantage of to basically use things like FaceTime or Skype or Teams to be able to actually have group meetings where they see each other and of course work with each other on either projects or just have staff meetings that way. The last area is going to relate to cybersecurity. And ultimately, this is a reality that we're constantly on the lookout for. From an IT perspective, our biggest nightmare as IT firms is protecting the data of our clients and ensuring there is an adequate balance between being overly protective, where we make it very difficult for them to use the systems, but also feeling confident that their systems are adequately protected to reduce any risk of having hackers introduce ransomware and things like that. And the reality is that hackers are taking advantage of these times because now more folks are connecting from home to get their work done, which means they're using more devices to connect in. In fact, some schools are doing e-learning where kids are having to use their parents' computers to connect and download some homework and things like that. And if they have access to a home computer and potentially that home computer is a work laptop, guess what? They will likely use that laptop too. And maybe they will download games on it or potentially other things or visit websites that maybe have malicious code. So these are concerns that increase the general risk of getting infected. The usage of personal devices. There's certainly a shortage of laptops or some laptops already in the marketplace, meaning that many of the businesses that have not prepped early on to have either spare laptops to use for folks to work from home are having to resort to ask employees to use their home computers. And that presents a significant risk given the fact that you're mixing a home computer with work, which may potentially have what we call a keylogger or a little virus and malware that captures all the information that you're typing in on a computer. The information could be the login to a clearinghouse for medical offices where a hacker potentially now has visibility over all the claims and patient information. Or it could be for a finance company, it's access to QuickBooks Online and it shows all the financial details of a certain company. But these are things that could potentially pose a significant risk for those folks having to use their personal computers to connect. But there's certainly ways to curb that. And one of them is obviously increasing the different security measures within your organization. And it starts with really employee awareness. You know, one of the things that we always joke around with clients whenever we talk about security awareness is, first thing we say is, we will test your staff using a number of tools and we will send them fake emails to see who will fall for the fake emails and who will click on the link. And that way we know what your weak links are, or the folks that just simply don't know and they need training. And part of that is really educating the folks and tell them, hey, you fell for that fake Netflix or Bank of America email. Guess what? We're going to have to sign you up for a 15 to 20 minute security training so that you don't do it again. Because ultimately, there may be a time where it will be a real phishing attempt, and then you will click and infect the organization with ransomware. Also, being able to roll out security tools on computers, especially now that some of the computers are going to be used at home. If you don't have any strong security tools deployed, this is the time to make sure you have them or check that you have them installed. IT makes mistakes too. Some cases, one or two computers may be missed on the deployment of antivirus or threat detection tools. How can you ensure that all your machines are protected? Ask your IT vendor for an inventory of machines and ensure that you're seeing a list that shows you a green check mark next to every computer that relates to security. And then, of course, the last but not least, reviewing your disaster recovery, DR, and business continuity plan, BCP. It may be that folks will work from home, but what if the server crashes? Do you have adequate backups to be able to recover? Especially this should be ongoing, but ultimately, when was the last time you had some restore drills to be able to be confident that your system are recoverable and not assume that a successful backup means a successful recovery? Because most of the time, unfortunately, it does not succeed every time. So as we covered a number of these areas, let's really talk about some of the tools that are available to you. We put this list together of a number of solutions that are available for you to pick and choose from. Some of them you may already have within your organization, especially those folks attending this webinar who may already have Office 365. A lot of these things you actually have full access to. For others who don't, you can start and consider some of these tools that will allow you to connect from home, as an example, or connect to an office computer, AnyDesk, Log Me In, TeamViewer. These are all tools that are available for a monthly fee, and you can purchase yourself directly. Some of them have some free plans. And of course, those come with some limitations, so just be aware. If you're considering giving access or forwarding the incoming calls from the office to some sort of soft phone or voice over IP that folks can answer from home, believe it or not, you don't necessarily have to change your phone provider. If you decide to send folks to work from home, what you can do is you can forward those calls to a voice over IP provider like RingCentral, Microsoft Teams, 8x8, and then answer them at home just like if you were at the office. And separating personal devices like personal cell phones and landlines from office phones, so you have still full control. Same thing with faxes, leveraging eFax. For audio video conferencing and even screen share, and I know we take that for granted, but screen share is extremely helpful, especially when you have something on the screen. And traditionally, you would tell somebody, can you swing by my office? Let me show you one of the issues that I'm experiencing. Now you can say, hey, let me share my screen and show you what I'm talking about, and still have a video call as well with them. Teams, WebEx, Uber Conference, there's a number of different tools as well out there. Some of them are free, but just be mindful of that. Project management. There's certainly a number of cases where you still have a few projects you want to work on with some folks, and you no longer have the opportunity to use a whiteboard in the conference room and things like that. Microsoft Planner, Trello, Smartsheets, those are great tools that can get you going, and you can absolutely use them from anywhere. Group texting or group SMS, TextMagic, group texting, those are all great tools to send mass text to everybody. That way you can stay in contact and communicate with them, any changes, updates, or any relevant information. Ultimately, you can still use just regular chat messages within Microsoft Teams and some of the other tools, but this is just an alternative option for folks looking to use text. Remote security tools, SentinelOne, Trend Micro, Microsoft Defender, Advanced Threat Protection. These are some of the common tools used out there, and these are not your traditional antivirus tools. They actually go beyond the traditional scanning because they're a little bit more intelligent, where they analyze the behavior happening on the home computer or work computer, for example, and if they detect some abnormal behavior like accessing too many files at once, deleting too many files, scanning different ports, and all these different things that typically hackers attempt to do, or malware, they will actually stop it and report that there's a problem. So that adds an extra layer of protection that goes beyond your general antivirus, because honestly, if antivirus is the only thing you have in the environment, then that is absolutely not sufficient for your protection, whether it's for people working from home or even people working at the office. You need the next level up. Employee engagement tools. I talked earlier about folks working remotely. They're facing, obviously, this is very challenging times for everybody amongst the stress and everything that they have to endure. These are tools that I've highlighted here from People Pulse, Office Vibe, Culture Amp that will actually reach out to staff and provide them with a quick and short surveys that you can answer using different icons, but it will give you a sense of what the morale is for your organization, regardless of where those folks are. And that way you're able to reach out to them individually and try to address some of the challenges or accommodate for some of the issues that they're experiencing that maybe they need your assistance with. Remote compliance, attendance tracking, and monitoring tool. Time Doctor and Vrioto, these are all popular tools that, from a compliance and monitoring perspective, they're very helpful, because ultimately, if you want to have visibility over the different interactions with the different files and how the applications are being used, they will give you an overview of what's happening with some of those folks when they're using the computers remotely. Some folks obviously have to be careful. This is not a big brother where you're actually seeing what they're typing per se and things like that. You're not. However, you do have to be transparent with the employees and explain that, really, since the organization has never, let's say, experienced sending people to work from home and you don't know what to expect and you have sensitive data on the systems, you just want to make sure that you have this as a layer of protection and compliance just to be able to track. It's no different than giving employees, a key fob to come into the building and they clock in and clock out. It's just a protection. You could easily tell them just put in your hours, but some folks obviously have to use time clocks. It's just standard operating procedure. So, but those are very useful tools. And then the last and not least is the employee collaboration in real-time chat. Folks typically within an organization can talk to each other as they're walking by each other and say hello, check on how their day is going, how their weekend was, or talk about work. Ultimately, having some of these chat tools that are highlighted here, Teams, Slack, Twist app, give you a platform that you can still have conversations. But the nice thing about these tools is they also protect and secure the information that's listed in the tools. And this is relevant, especially if you're within a healthcare organization, as an example. And if there is sensitive information, HIPAA, these platforms are HIPAA compliant. But you just have to be mindful as well. Do not, share patient medical records and things like that. That needs to stay within the EMR. Or if you're accounting or other verticals, just be mindful that some information should not always be shared in some of these chat rooms, because ultimately these folks are still working from home. And from a HIPAA perspective, when you have a computer at home that's unlocked nonstop, because obviously somebody has to walk away and come back, and let's say they have, a family member trying to jump on it real quick to check on something, and then all of a sudden that information is leaked out, then that's obviously a concern. But let's talk about what if you decide that you want to send folks home so that they can work from home. What does that look like? What if you're not prepared? You don't have any spare devices, but you don't want your staff to use computers, their personal computers. Well, ultimately, and this is where I put the orange star, is you really have to consult your IT vendor. But ultimately, if you were to boil it down to what do you need to effectively work from home efficiently, is number one, you need a laptop or some sort of tablet. That's number one. These are just some light examples that I found on Amazon that have Windows 10 Professional. If you want Windows 10, I personally have a MacBook, but there's nothing wrong with Apple devices either. And these are devices that are affordable and that you can still get because they're still in stock. On the right-hand side, those are headsets. Some of them are wired headsets. You can also get wireless headsets so that you can communicate, have audio and video chat with your coworkers and some of the other folks. They're extremely affordable. Printers, not that you want to buy printers for anybody that works from home, but what if you're the kind of individual that really has to have paper to write notes on or to review certain reports? $50 for a printer is not bad. Now, the ink may be expensive, but ultimately the intent here is to just really highlight the options that you have there. Now, with that being said, you still need to engage your IT provider to make sure that all these devices are managed, they're updated, protected, and of course tracked. Part of this also is ensuring that you have a contract in place that if you do send company property home with an employee, did they sign a paper accepting the responsibility to take care of the equipment and not damage it? What if it's damaged? What if it's lost? What's their financial responsibility? These are all things that you have to consider. And again, unfortunately, this is adding more burden on everybody because now you have to go and prepare all these different documents and SOPs in order to be able to offer these options to folks. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about supporting business resiliency to get through these challenging times. And ultimately, that's really what we're attempting to do here is help a lot of the folks out there understand that it is possible if it's an option for them and they're interested in working from home. There's certainly plenty of technology tools that can support that, but ensuring that it goes beyond the technology conversation. There's the operation side of it, there's the management side of it, and those are just as important as the software tools. So to help with a lot of the questions that you may potentially have around what kind of document do I need, what kind of checklist do I have to have, and things like that, our folks prepared a toolkit that you'll be able to download, and it's available through our website free of charge. Again, a lot of this is we're just providing just some support to our existing clients, and of course, anybody out there within the community that has questions and needs some assistance. Here's the link. You can go to our website /coronavirus-toolkit. Again, it's biztechnologysolutions.com /coronavirus-toolkit. Some of the other things that we're scheduling for the next few weeks, because obviously more folks are having more questions around some of these things. And the most recent one, or the most recent change, especially that affects healthcare, and we have quite a few folks that are in healthcare that we support, is the conversation around telehealth. In fact, officially, as of yesterday, it was approved that, believe it or not, FaceTime can be used, including things like Facebook Messenger, to interact with patients without necessarily having the HIPAA concerns. Yes, believe it or not, you are now officially able to use things like FaceTime and Facebook Messenger to interact with patients without necessarily having to have concerns around HIPAA. Basically loosening up the rules to basically kind of let physicians be able to see more patients and follow up with them as they're working from home. But ultimately, there are already a number of tools for telehealth that folks can consider. And as a result, we're actually adding another session in the next couple of weeks that will actually highlight how you can get going with some of the existing tools that will support full telehealth capabilities. And of course, there's some paid options that are out there in the market that a lot of folks ask us about. Global Med, Henry Schein, those are all great platforms that we've worked with in the past, and they work extremely well. But we'll share a number of those with you. Some of the other topics we have are the top 5 common technology pitfalls, especially during the pandemic that we're experiencing. And of course, everybody is looking at costs, more so now, especially this week, than ever. The stock market is concerning to a lot of folks, business owners and organizations. People are starting to recognize, should they slow down on cash flow is going to be a concern. Should they slow down on projects? Should they consider this? Do they have to, get rid of certain things? These are all questions that nobody necessarily has an answer for, but these are real concerns that folks are starting to consider. How can I cut down my IT costs? Maybe this is the time to reevaluate your IT expenses. Maybe it's licensing or equipment that you were planning to purchase and decide that maybe there's another option where you do a hosted or leasing model. So we will address that in one of the upcoming webinars. And the last thing I will leave you with, and this is something that I've decided to do just because this week I've had an opportunity to interact with quite a few medical practices and few customers of ours, trying to address a lot of their questions and concerns, is I've cleared 3 days out of next week, 3 mornings, to do nothing but just go through phone calls with one of our team members and address any concerns or questions that folks have around technology in general. And this is not a service. This is not to fix any IT problems per se. This is more to address your concerns, your fears, your problems that you're unsure about how to tackle them, and just want to talk to somebody and say, hey, I'm calling the hotline. Give me some input on this. What do you think I should do or should consider? And then hopefully we can provide you with some valuable input whether you're a customer of ours or not, it really does not matter. That's not the intent. The intent is just to address your needs, and especially during these challenging times. So that's the phone number that's going to be available on March 23rd, 24th, and the 25th from 7:30 to 12. And I forewarn you, if you hear dogs in the background, that's my fault. I have not quarantined my dogs yet, but that may be the case. So I'll open it up for questions and see what some of the folks may have questions this morning.
Yeah, Retta, we got a few questions over here. So the first question we got was, what happens when the remote worker has a technical issue? What do they do?
Well, when a remote worker has a technical issue, I think the first thing they need to do is contact their IT provider. Ultimately, if they are working from home and the support covers that employee, the first thing they need to do is contact their help desk and then get support from those folks. If they're using a home PC, that can be a little bit tricky because ultimately IT may not have their tools installed on that home PC. So there may be some conversations or back and forth to make sure you define the boundaries of or identify what are some of those boundaries. You may be surprised and call the IT provider and they say, well, it's your home PC. We don't support you. Sorry, tough luck. Our support model is all inclusive. If you have a smartphone, a tablet, a computer that you're using for remote access and things like that, we'll support you. But we also have certain boundaries. If we don't have our tools on the device and it's not an approved device, it makes it very challenging to try to support something that may not necessarily be adequate for what it's being used for.
All right. The next question we got is, do you have any suggestions for monitoring tools?
Monitoring tools that I recommended on one of the slides, Time Doctor and Spectra 360, and those are available in the slide deck. Those are valuable tools that provide you some insights into productivity of the remote employee. And the nice thing about them is they're not where it's not Big Brother, where they're capturing all the information that's happening on that computer, because that's not really the intent. The intent here is to just time tracking and ensuring compliance, making sure that some of the links that are being visited in websites are safe. And that's really ultimately the intent. But those are the two products that we would highly recommend.
Okay. Do you offer cybersecurity training remotely?
I think everything is going to be remote for a while from an IT perspective in training, whether it's cybersecurity or any sort of training on the different tools. Cybersecurity, the short answer is yes. In our case, we have done many training sessions on site for a lot of our clients. Moving forward, I think the preference and what we're hearing from our clients is they would rather have it done remotely, which obviously we're in the technology business, so we are able to accommodate for that. So yes, we do.
Awesome. Do you see more small and medium businesses moving forward with remote work after the crisis is over?
Yes, so there is a significant surge. So the last statistics in 2018, there was over 3.2% of working population working from home globally. And we're talking about millions of folks working from home. So that trend continued into 2019. Now, 2020 will absolutely shatter those benchmarks, because ultimately folks are forced in a way, quote unquote, to work from home. So they don't have an option in some cases where, there was some flexibility in the past where you can, have some folks work from home a couple of days a week. Now, some businesses are ultimately forcing people to work from home. We've seen that with Google, with Facebook, a number of other companies, even small businesses. They're recognizing that for some responsibilities or job roles, the folks can actually do the work as well from home. It's just that making sure that you define what those expectations are of that employee, and you have to be very clear on what that is.
Okay. Do any of the recommended tools provide training to the remote workers?
Yes. So if you're looking at any of those platforms, believe it or not, the majority of them do supply the subscribers or the customers with videos, cheat sheets, and things like that. A good example when we have folks tell us that they go on Office 365 as the platform, a lot of time we find out that whoever deployed the platform for them just deployed it with just simple email and left them high and dry. But then we go back in and show them all the training resources that are available to them. And we package it in a way that they know that now they can use things like Microsoft Teams for collaboration and conferencing. We show them they can use Planner for project management, task management. We show them how to use things like, let's see what I'm trying to think of. OneDrive for cloud storage. And again, the good news is a lot of these platforms do have plenty of material. It's all about how it's being packaged so that the employees have, during the onboarding, and you have to consider this, you have to go through an onboarding process. When somebody says, I'm going to start working from home, you need to get with your IT firm and say, do you have an onboarding step-by-step guide for folks to go from home? And one of the steps should be go to these different links to receive training on 1, 2, 3, and 4 product XYZ.
All right, and the last question we have here is Teams free version okay to use?
Yes, Teams is okay to use. The free version has all the capabilities that you would typically need, with the exception of some screen sharing is not available, and of course there's a limit on how many concurrent users can be on one of the meetings. But for most of small businesses, it is absolutely adequate to use. And keep in mind, there's definitely a number of other tools, but I would say Teams, given that it's available for free, it's a great starting point for collaboration, real-time chat, and things like that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Retta, and thank you everyone for joining today. We hope this was helpful. As a reminder, you can download the toolkit we put together, and that is at biztechnologysolutions.com/coronavirus-toolkit. Retta has that up here on the screen now. Thank you again.
Thank you.